Intro to this one.
What was it again? It was
Donner.
Right. So Donner.
I might just leave both of them in. God, nobody can do it like Chewie. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, we try too hard.
Yeah, it's just gotta be off the cuff. I don't give a fuck. I always forget I have to do these. Like that perfect attitude. I can't replicate. I'm gonna leave all that in. Anyhow, hi, welcome Behind the Hype with me, your host, as always, Brian Dress. With me, as always, Jonathan Hardesty.
Yeah, hey.
If you can't tell by that intro, Chewie was unable to join us this week. It's not that she just can't. It's that she's been working so goddamn hard over the past week and a half that when it came to watching anything after our son went to bed, she passed right the fuck out. And that included the Donner Cut, that included Suicide Squad, that included TV shows that she asked to watch. She's just not. She just was not lasting. So
literally, she couldn't.
Yeah. So as opposed to trying to force her to watch it in the middle of the day, which she did not want to do, I'm like, you should probably just take the week off. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to take the week off. So no Chewie this week. Although she did say she liked what she saw of it. But she didn't really remember the original cut that well, so she couldn't really tell the difference. So I don't think she would have had that much fun talking about it anyways. So this one kind of worked out. But she will be back, schedule permitting, for Lethal Weapon 2. And hopefully Matt Dykes will be joining that week as well. And that should hopefully be next week. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go back into the Superman 2 Donner Cut. There, was that better?
Yeah. Donner Cut.
So let's start with the I think the elephant in the room of you had not seen this, right?
I've never seen the Donner Cut until this thing, until this podcast, until now.
And I had seen it once when it came to DVD, and I watched it with a friend of mine, and I had forgotten how ridiculously different it is, while also insanely similar. And things that I remembered, clearly remembered, I was just fucking wrong about. I remember it just ending at the cave. Fortress of Solitude. I'm a Superman fan. I can do better than this. But in the Fortress of Solitude, for some reason I remember the ending just being right then and there. And I'm like, I don't know why it ends in the Fortress of Solitude. And I've had people it doesn't. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it does. And no, I was dead wrong.
Yeah, no. Very wrong. Yeah, no version of Superman 2 has ended at the Fortress of Solitude, except maybe when they kicked Donner off the project.
I think he was kicked off far before that.
Probably. Yeah, the different Fortress of Solitude scene.
Yes. But otherwise, I'm not really sure how we're going to approach this episode, because it does kind of require, unfortunately, that we talk a little bit about the original cut as well. So we're going to try to do our best to review both in kind of the Behind the Hype fashion, which is we don't really review it, we just kind of talk about it. But to do that, we kind of have to talk about both of them. And I don't mean this as an offense to Donner. I know he wasn't a fan of the theatrical cut, but most of us kind of are in some way or another. I don't think there was ever anybody out there like, this version sucks. So it doesn't quite have the parallel to say the Snyder cut, where it's one version is abysmal and the other is phenomenal. I think both of these would be about, at least in my ratings, I know John rates a little bit harsher than I do, but I'd say both of them about 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4? Okay. I'd probably do 3 out of 5. So,
sure.
Yes. A little harsher.
Sure.
If I do the math right, which I don't know. I'm not a mathematic. I'm an asthmatic. So I loved the original Superman 2.
Yeah.
I watched it about 1 billion times. Watched 1 and I didn't have access to 1 nearly as much as I had 2, and I watched 2 a lot.
I was the opposite. I'd seen 1 more times than I can possibly count. 2 I've seen a lot.
Yeah, and so I ended up watching both. Just as an unofficial, where have they been doing sort of thing. I watched the first one because I bought the whole box set of just all of them up to the Superman Returns. All of them, all the editions. I got the 3-hour Superman 1 cut, the Donner cut, Superman 2, all the commentaries, and a bunch of 40s cartoons. It's okay, a good buy.
That's a good buy.
Yeah, very. I'm excited to go through the rest of them. But that said, yeah, no, I didn't remember a lot from the first one, and watching the Donner cut was like, where did this scene go? Why is this here at this moment in time? Oh, that scene's shorter. Or that thing is shorter. Like, that was me the whole movie. I still enjoyed it, to your point. Like, 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5. Like, I still enjoyed it. And I would say maybe this about the same, but it felt missing something. I had to really reconcile a lot that it was the same movie, different. And not in a way that, like, it saved the cut. Like, we had a really good cut, and then this was also a good cut.
Yeah, I feel like the best would be a bigger blend of the two. Like they could both use a little bit from each other. Like I like that. Say like Lois Lane is a little bit more. She's a little more intelligent in the Donner cut. Like she has a little bit more like agency. Like she can figure out Superman in a second. Like it doesn't take her any time at all. Whereas like the other one, it took her a little bit, and it's a little bit goofier about it.
Yeah, and she's devious. She's devious in the Donner cut. Like she shoots him.
Yeah,
with a gun. I'm like, that's hardcore. Like, there's an element of go-gettedness, go-getterness, I guess, of Lois Lane, where she's intense. At least in any version, it's like she's gonna get what she wants. She's gonna get the scoop, and it's like, yeah, no, she's gonna shoot Clark on a hunch.
Yeah, and
like,
she shoots him with a blank, so he would have been fine.
Yeah, but even still, just even that thought process, and just tricking Superman. Tricking the most powerful superhero in the DC universe. Like, that's cool.
It's cool, and then like that alone, compared to every other Superman movie out there, including ones that I really enjoy, is the only time that they really show why Superman, at least like I'm speaking comic book wise here, like why Superman really loves Lois Lane. She's his like intellectual equal. And they don't really ever show that in these movies because I feel like they're always kind of afraid to have like Superman not be the biggest and best thing on screen at all times. But Lois Lane is right there with him. I mean, she's not a superhero, at least most of the time, but she is that smart. And Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve and everybody, like they really sold that in their scenes together. And granted, some of their scenes were fucking like test footage, but still, like, you can see like they had a really clear idea of like where is she with him, like how does she stack up against Superman, and that's why he's so attracted to her. It's not just because like pretty, it's like she's
right,
a legit person, and I really appreciate that. And I don't think it's lost in the original, but it's a little bit more showcased here.
Yeah, no, especially coming off of watching the first one where their rooftop date was freaking smoldering, I guess, for lack of anything stronger to put. Like, I forgot how flirty that was. I'm watching this with my kids, and I'm like, this is like they are going at it with their eyes. It is nuts.
Oh yeah, and the second she walks out from like the iron cast thing, oh, pink. What? Your underwear? You moved.
Yeah. And it's like, do you eat? And it's like, oh my god. And then to get to this with their interplay back and forth, like, if anything, their chemistry, even with the test footage in the Donner cut, is, I feel, stronger.
Yeah.
In this, and that was really nice to see. Very surprising, but very helpful, especially when, like, he decides to give up his superness for her.
Yeah.
Which is, it plays a lot shorter in the Donner cut, like a lot shorter and kind of compacted. Or at least it feels that way in the cut. But it feels like it's more of an important decision, and I don't know.
See, I would go a little different on that one. In the original cut, it felt like an important decision to me. In the Donner cut, it felt like a teenager acting out. And that's kind of why I liked it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm my bad. I'm kind of conflating these because
it's tough not to.
It is, and here's the difficulty: is that it's followed by that conversation with Jor-El and Kal-El, and he's like their father and son are just having it out.
Yeah,
and he never has that in the Lester version.
Well, no, because I mean they couldn't use Marlon Brando because he's in the middle of suing the studio, so he just couldn't be in the movie. Right.
So so from the other cut, it does feel like it was a bigger thing, but here it feels more, I guess, potent. Like,
yeah,
I guess the rashness of giving up all your superpowers for it feels like it makes sense because it's a rash decision from a very young Kryptonian, right?
Yeah.
he's never been in love other than just once with this person, the first person.
Yeah,
he's truly kind of got. Yeah. Yep. So you're right. It's part of the problem is like I'm piecing the two cuts together.
Yeah, and it's really hard not to. Like really hard not to, because they are both good and they both kind of stick in your head.
And it's more so than, and even the Justice League example we used earlier, which that's a harder one because it's like, no, I can separate those two movies because I can cut all the other stuff out. And, the Zack Snyder version is the best one. That is the version. But this, it's like, we got two great versions that are all the same but different. Like, they're good. They're both, I couldn't pick, I'd have a hard time picking one over the other.
Yeah, and I've seen people, like, really throw the gauntlet of, like, no, the Donner cut or nothing. And it's like, I mean, I will, the filmmaker fan in me will be like, well, of course, because, filmmaker intent. People shouldn't be ripped off of projects. Like, you never get a good product out of that. The fact that they did is very surprising. But beyond that, I'm like, no, the other movie isn't bad. And, like, the Donner cut isn't bad. But, like, there's things in the Donner cut that I appreciate more than the other one. So, like, I don't think I'd ever edge one over the one or the other. But, like, my appreciative, like, the tonality from the first movie to the second movie, I think, is incredibly crucial. Whereas in the original to Lester, it's like more the same but different. It's the same sort of like really optimistic. Everything is fine. Everything is great, and we got Superman here and everything's cool. Whereas in the Donner version, it feels like that more classic superhero arc of like the first one is like that. Look, man, you're fucked. We got Superman. And in the second one, it's like, that's not going to work every time. And now it's a little bit more difficult. And I have a little bit more emotional stake in this. And, father, like it gets a little bit more dramatic as it would. So like the tonality makes more sense. Like there's an actual arc going here between the two films. And you can see like when they originally wanted to film these back to back, it's like, oh, I can see where that was going.
Yes, and I think that's the big thing with the Donner cut. Knowing that they filmed them back to back, or Donner started to,
attempted to, anyways.
That made more sense watching Superman 1 to Superman 2 Donner cut because they flowed together so well. Down like just pacing wise, I was like, oh, I was lucky enough to watch them one after the other,
right?
And it was like, this may as well have been just one experience for how the arc worked. And even just the Superman having I've done my duty, like I've that never shows up in the Lester version. Like,
no,
I did what was asked. Don't I get to be happy? And I was like, hey, that's a really big thematic moment. Like that's huge and important, and the logical place for this to go.
And it's a theme in Superman that so many people have tried to pull off, and so many have failed. And I'm not just trying to throw shade at like any of the movies that we've seen, like because almost every Superman movie will attempt this storyline, at least that theme at some point or another. But same with comic book writers, like everyone who's written Superman at some point wants to let Superman be happy because he's such a good guy, and you kind of can't. And that's kind of the bane of Superman. And I think this movie captures that amazingly well by trying to do it through like an almost adolescent tantrum of like, no, I found a girl I love and I want to be happy with her. Fuck you. I already saved the world. I turned back time. I saved the world. I'm done. I did my job. I'm going to go be happy now. And you fucking can't. The world will always need you.
Which then makes the ending just so potent. And I think we mentioned earlier with The Omen, just a sense of pacing that Donner has. And I think maybe that's where I would give this cut the edge over two, even though I feel like I have much more of a nostalgic love for the original version, the Lester cut.
Sure.
Is that this feels well paced. Like where that thing I mentioned earlier about like, oh, that cut is shorter. Like that conversation's shorter. And it's like, well, yeah, a lot of those conversations, like the two police officers, like, I can't eat beans. It's like, they cut that a lot out of that scene. And I was like, yeah, that works. That makes a lot of sense. We're just getting to these points and letting the argument with his father, Jor-El, that argument play out longer. Letting the Phantom Zone stuff play out longer.
Yeah. And
letting the important bits actually breathe versus two goofball cops on a Texas road. Like, the pacing feels better. It feels more Donner. I can sense the filmmaker in the way this thing is put together.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of like paramount to enjoying this thing, because like there's a part of me that I'm not sure how often I'm going to revisit the Donner cut, like Cards on the Table, even though I really, really enjoyed it, because there are things that just kind of irk me, even though these things work. And it could just be because the Donner cut was supposed to be done in what, 79, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Like fucking long ass time ago, and then it wasn't finished until 2006. Like, this isn't that old of a version. So they have goofy things. Like, the ending is very goofy of I'm going to turn the world back around again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so in the third Superman movie, he was going to be the villain, right? Because he can't just keep doing that to the planet. Like, you just can't keep reversing time. And it just kind of feels lazy just to use the same gimmick that you did in the end of the last one. But I have a feeling that's just a product of, we didn't shoot a fucking ending. Like, we never got to it. So we had to throw something on there. So we'll just reuse footage from the first one. And we'll kind of hobble together a little bit from what Lester shot. And just make something happen.
Right. Because at least with the Lester cut at the end, he used, I mean, the power is goofy, but he uses a kiss to like take her Lois's memory away.
Yeah.
And kind of clean the slate that way. And this one, it was less clear that that's what they were doing. Because like even though I had seen him reverse time in the first like Superman, like the connection wasn't quite there. Even if it felt like a good book, and sort of, it like a lot of logic was lost in that ending. But what would bring me back to this is their farewell on the rooftop was so heart-wrenching that the Lester version didn't get. It was just like a kind of a glossy, lens over him kissing her, and then she's just like there as he walks away or flies away. It's like, oh, okay, she forgets he's got that power.
Yeah,
and it's kind of skeevy. But this one, it was like tearful. He was sad. Like her eyes were just a mess, and I was almost a mess.
Well, because in this one, they legit break up.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't get that before. Like, Superman dumps her. Like, it sucks. And but it's also very real. Like, that Superman probably would have to do that. At least in this version of the world. I mean, we've seen him with Lois Lane countless times and have it work just fine. But at least from this point of view, like, that just wasn't the case. And then, like, totally off of that topic, like, just moving forward with other stuff, like, the other thing that this movie does to me versus every other one of them is it makes me really upset that we didn't get like a really great another movie with Christopher Reeve as Superman, because after this, like, the decline is fast. I do not like Superman 3 at all, and Superman Quest for Peace, and we did a whole podcast on it, is laughably, hysterically, unbelievably bad.
I will by myself watch those just for the sense of like, oh, this is how far they fell. But comparatively, the Lester version at least lets you down gently down a slope. You get to roll down the slope and trip down it and kind of tumble a bit, and you're like, oh god. Whereas going from Donner cut to 3, it's a jump. It's like falling off the cliff. Yeah, it's it's painful. It's going to be a painful drop from Donner cut to 3. Just Cards on the Table. So I mean, I guess that's one point in Lester's favor. It was a gentle decline.
And now that we're here in the future, and I can look at this and be like, wouldn't it be really cool if Christopher Reeve was still with us and he could come back as an older Superman in like one of these like DC movies, kind of how they have like Michael Keaton coming back? Like, that'd have been really cool. I would have been here for this. It's just kind of a like, I got more bummed out by this movie than I think I probably should have. Like, not just the breakup scene, which was done very well and kind of bummed me out, but that was kind of nothing. I'm just watching this movie going like, I feel like I was robbed of more fucking Christopher Reeve Superman, because I have, kind of 2 movies, kind of 3 movies if I count this one twice. But even with that, it's like one of those is the same movie twice, and his performance is very different in between the two because one's a little bit more lighthearted. But that alone makes me that much sadder, because I'm like, he can do both. He can do super serious. I'm so mad at my dad for letting me give up my powers, even though it's my fault, and goddamn father! Like, you just see all that raw emotion on him, and he crushes it. And then you can flip to the Lester version, and he's kind of a cornball. And it's like, he crushes that too. And it's like, damn it, I wanted more Christopher Reeve as Superman. And I know there's 2 more movies of it, but I don't really like those movies.
And like, it also doesn't like let him off the hook either, which I was worried about when I realized what was happening. Is like, he's gonna go back and get his powers, but he just had that whole conversation, and I was like, well, no, you're never gonna see me again, Kal-El. This is it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh fuck. I got really emotional there.
Yeah.
But to what your earlier point was about just being robbed of Christopher Reeve, that happened for me with Superman 1, after Clark Kent shows back up after the roof date, and she's like, I just gotta get ready for our date or whatever, yawn Clark, and she goes to the bathroom and he just straightens his back. That's all he does, and it makes me just immensely sad that there isn't more. There's not more to work with, because I forgot how much of an amazing actor Christopher Reeve was from that movie to even this movie. Like, it's hard to say, because we're in the realm of superhero movies where everyone's fine. Everyone's fine, and that's just the rule. That's how it's supposed to be. But Christopher Reeve was stellar.
Yeah. And like that's like, I can go through almost every actor who's played Superman and gone, I pretty much dug him. Like, there's very few people that have ever actually picked up the cape and I've gone, no thanks. And I'm including like most voice actors I've listened to. Like, most people, if they've gotten through the audition process, can usually pull it off, which is saying something that we've been very lucky with casting. But no one has done as good of a job as Christopher Reeve. Like, it just doesn't exist. And I say that as a gargantuan fan of both Brandon Routh and Henry Cavill's take on the characters, but they're both so different. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Brandon Routh was different while trying to be Christopher Reeve. And it's just like, none of this worked as good as the first go, which I hate being the guy to do that, because, you know, you just sound like an asshole saying, like, oh, the first time they did it best. But in this case, Christopher Reeve, I mean, granted, he even wasn't the first. There was a whole bunch of people on TV before him, but he is the best.
Yeah. And it holds up. And that's what when I got the set, I had a moment before I hit, click buy online. And I was like, am I just buying this out of nostalgia? Am I going to watch this and be like, okay. I loved it when I was a kid and that's it. And for these two movies, in particular, no, that wasn't the case. It holds up. And it's not because it's a Superman thing, but Reeve. Yeah.
And just Donner's a hell of a filmmaker. Like, these movies were very tough to pull off, and he nailed it, both of them.
And he managed to do so with like a light touch of humor. And this is gonna, maybe for people who don't like Zack Snyder's Justice League, watching this now, I'm like, there's echoes of that in Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah,
the right amount of humor that's not too much, but there's a little bit of a wink and nudge and a sense like. Donner's got a sense of humor in this, but it doesn't distract you. It's not taking away from the experience.
Yeah. And even like, I'll say what I will about Disney and loudly as often as I can, but to their credit, or I guess more so just Kevin Feige's credit, like, I read an interview with him whenever he hires a new director for the MCU, they have to watch Donner's Superman. That's the one piece of homework he gives them. Is like that's our beacon. That is the bar. You have to do it. Try to aim for that movie. Which even Marvel knows Donner's Superman is the fucking best. And to that credit, Superman 2 is right there with it. Like, Donner was on fire with these two things, and it's just such a shame. Like, our podcast probably isn't the best one to break down what happened, but if you go online and you look it up, like, it's very well documented why he left the project / fired from the project, and it's just kind of a bummer, because this guy should have seen this project through to the end, because it was worth it.
Oh yeah, and having him do a third one, like having him handle the topics of the other two, I think he would have been able to pull it off. Like.
Well, the fourth one was more, from what I understand, there's a lot of Christopher Reeve's fault, too, because he was very anti-nuclear war, and then the filmmakers making it just had no idea how to handle that. Quest for Peace is rough.
Yeah, it is. But what I'm saying is, like, as a director, I feel like Donner probably could have figured out a way.
It's
like
better than what we got.
Yeah.
But then again, Canon Films was never going to pay for Donner.
Right.
Quest for Peace, man.
Yeah, Quest for Peace. That is a...
maybe the third one could have worked. Maybe the third one, but not Quest for Peace. I think that one was doomed. As soon as Canon was involved, they were doomed.
Yeah. But to your point, like, this is early, like Superman 2, not necessarily, but like 1 and 2, like both of those are fairly early on in his career too.
Yeah.
And it's like to have the best superhero film of all time and part of one, that early on in your career, like no one else gets that.
No, and it's just like watching this movie, and like it's funny that I watched it the same week that I watched like the new Suicide Squad movie, because like you just get such a vast like how much superhero movies have changed over the past 30-40 years, and it's like this movie, even being a somewhat inferior sequel, is so much better than so many of the superhero movies we get now. And it's like, just because it's a legit movie. That's all it is. It's just a film. Like, they actually went out and wanted to tell a story about a guy who's going through some shit. And like, that's just kind of nice. It's like a little refreshing that it's not just here to be spectacle after spectacle after spectacle. Like, this movie's not wall-to-wall action. In fact, compared to even the first one, there's very little action in Superman 2.
Yeah, I was actually, like, as I'm rewatching this, I was very surprised at how little action both movies have in total.
Yeah.
And was also surprised that at no point during my experience of watching the two movies was I being sold the other movie.
Yeah.
I felt like I was just being given a story, a movie about this alien who has superpowers, and that's his arc. I was like, wow, I have not watched superhero movies in this way since I last watched Superman.
Yeah. And then you go into the second one, and I know we got to start wrapping things up here at some point. Like, the second one is just like, you have a guy who's going through some shit, and he's got superpowers, and let's throw in generational trauma while we're at it. And here's a whole bunch of people that your dad dicked over, and now it's your problem. And like,
oh man,
like these stories are like heavy hitting. Like, Terrence Stamp as fucking Zod is amazing.
I think
everyone talks about Gene Hackman in this, like Gene Hackman in Superman, because he was such a good Lex Luthor. He's still not my favorite Lex Luthor, but he's a very good Lex Luthor. But Terrence Stamp as Zod is one of the best superhero or supervillains on screen ever. He's just horrifying.
Oh, yes. He is horrifying, and the way they took different cuts of his different deliveries of his lines, added more to him, and added more to the three of them, and just the generational trauma, as you put it, really hit in this one. Like, I was scared for Superman as Zod was going through, because he was legit a force. And I think some of the goofiness of the lesser cut kind of lessens that a little bit. He just kind of stands around and is like, Neil. And I'm like, well, I don't really, as a kid, I'm like, okay, fine. He's just a prisoner or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in this cut, I'm just like, this is some serious generational shit.
Yeah. And Terrence Stamp sells it. And the other two do too. She does. The big guy doesn't really do much in either version. He's just less of an idiot in the Donner cut than the Lester one. Still not the brightest bulb in the box in either one of them, though.
But yeah, the other two even get more in this, and I think that's the big credit too. It's like you even get more from Ursa, kind of a little bit more of her anger and her antagonistic nature, and more fascination with the badges. I was like, I like seeing that have a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah, and I also just like that they nailed so much, so well of just. All right, we're on Earth. We're out of the Phantom Zone. You are ants. You have no powers. You can bow down before me because you have nothing you can throw at me. And like that vast superiority that all three of them have, but especially coming from Terrence Stamp, it just radiates off the screen. It's like no one can beat them. And they even prove that in the scene with the president. It's like, I'm gonna kneel, and it's like, well, that's not actually the president. Who's the president? I am, and I'm also going to kneel.
Right.
So well done.
Just yeah. No, it's hard to believe that in this Donner cut, that there's so many of those moments with so many different actors in there. Even just drama aside, putting Brando back in, you're just like, okay, this movie's already on an acting level, hitting on so many different higher levels than I was ready for.
It still drives me up the goddamn wall that no one could get Marlon Brando to pronounce Krypton right. But beyond that,
I found it amazing.
Krypton. It's not Krypton. It's Krypton. No, Krypton. No.
Krypton.
Listen,
Brando.
Mr. Brando, if you could just, it's Krypton. Oh, fuck it, it's Krypton. Whatever. We got Marlon Brando in our movie.
I will say it. I'll say it Krypton, or I'm going to be a piece of luggage.
He can say however the fuck he wants. Like, I still get mad when I listen to people talk about Super Mario Brothers. What? It's Mario. Just say Mario. It's not Mario. Get out of here.
Yeah, but I was not expecting to have Brando back in.
Chewie had forgotten, like, the little bit that she was awake for. She'd forgotten he wasn't in it. And I'm like, see, and Brando's in this. She's like, yeah, Brando's in Superman. I'm like, no, he wasn't in the second one. He wasn't?
No. No, the mother was.
This is the mother. They
Yeah.
couldn't they couldn't fix it. They couldn't fix the lawsuit.
Right. And then just even his description of the three villains was so affecting. And
Yeah.
having that tie together, instead of just being delivered to you, you just have like for all his shit that we have historically for Marlon Brando, like he sold Jor-El. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of who I see as Jor-El, and everyone kind of has to stack up against that, and that's a hard thing.
I also love and then we will get into the favorite moments here in just a second, but because this one was almost one of mine, but now that we're kind of talking about it, with Brando in this movie, you get that scene with him and Gene Hackman, where Gene Hackman is trying to be like Superman, because, of course, Jor-El created the Fortress of Solitude crystals so that he can have a conversation with his son. Even though it's pre-recorded, he knows everything he's going to say because reasons. But when fucking Lex Luthor shows up, he didn't know what Lex Luthor was going to say, but he's still trying to have one side of the conversation. And like, that's a good question, my son. I didn't say anything. He's just a little frustrated the whole time. It's such a great moment of levity. Like, this stuff just worked in this movie. I just love his. I didn't say anything. All right, I think we've done it. I think we should start with our favorite moments, and that was kind of like my backup choice of a favorite moment. So why don't you go first?
Oh, cool. Put me on the spot. That's great. I think the extended Phantom Zone scene, and this ties to like something that I would find as a favorite moment of mine in the first one, is the kind of like as we go. Brando just starts talking to his son before he becomes Superman, and he just starts going off on his thing, giving his monologue, and we're just in space, and it's just traveling through space and being all almost like 2001-esque, right? Yeah. And it's getting all heady and all that, and I'm like, oh, I love this shit. And then to have that in here, but with just it twisted. They're prisoners. They're floating through this, and then all of a sudden, hey, there goes Superman right next to him. I'm like, God, this continuity is kind of great, and it's even why I liked the pilot for Supergirl for the CW, where it's like, oh yeah, she got there first, or no, there was some timing thing, right? Yeah, no, she was older, but then he got there first, so then he's older. I was like, this is flipped. It had that sense of like meeting and missing, timey-wiminess that I thought I really liked too. So it's not the flashiest of moments, but I liked seeing more of the horrific Phantom Zone. And the DVD sound or the Blu-ray sound quality on that was just scary.
I think mine would be a little bit different, but I still just... It's the scene that always stuck with me the most as a kid, because it always kind of freaked me out, and that's when it's the time that Lois Lane is like, fuck you, you're Superman. Like, obviously you're Superman, and it's when the kid falls off the waterfall. That scene always just stuck with me, because I'm just like Superman's in such a pickle here. Like, he has to save this kid, but he knows how smart Lois Lane is, and he really tries to lie his way out of it. But luckily in the Donner cut, she's like, well, fuck you, I'm just gonna shoot you. I know it's you. So I guess all of that kind of together would be my favorite thing, from like the kid falling through Lois shooting him. I'm like, it's just such a well-crafted scene and sequence that it's like, this was out of his control. Lois didn't concoct this situation. It's just, she was lucky. It was right place at the right time, and it just worked. And I think it didn't feel staged, and I really appreciated that. Like, all of it just worked really, really well. I love that stuff.
Yeah. And even with two kids who you know the kind of, the minute you're not attentive, something happens sort of fear that any parent has. Just to see that from this end of adulthood and parenthood, I'm just like, oh my God, kid, oh my God, kid, don't just get out of here. I'm going to tape you to the hot dog stand.
Yep. Just like you deserve. All right, let's do some double features. I can go first since I made you go first for the other one. My double feature for Superman 2, it's going to be, I know people are going to hate this double feature, and I might be the only one who does it, but I think it would be nice. And I would do Superman 2, the Donner Cut, followed up by Man of Steel. Specifically in that order, just to try to see, like think of it more like that. Like I think of the Donner Cut. I don't really think of the Donner Cut as like a solid film. I think of it as like a solid film experiment. Like you watch it like with the idea of like what it could have been. Like you watch the original Superman 2, and then you watch the Donner Cut. It's like, oh, this is what was going on here. I still like what I saw, but this would have been cool too, and it still is kind of cool. And I kind of do the same thing with the Donner Cut to Man of Steel. It's like, oh, okay, I really like Man of Steel. I honestly do really like Man of Steel. But like, you can kind of see like what it almost could have been if there'd just been, I don't know, something different to that movie. There's a way that movie could have been from what I think is pretty good to fucking amazing, and I just didn't quite get there. And I feel like they'd pair together well. Like Superman 2 could have been better than Superman 1, but it just didn't quite get there. Man of Steel could have been the best Superman movie ever, but it just didn't quite get there. And I think these two movies would pair well from like a educational standpoint.
Oh yeah, for sure. And give you a very a sense of what Zach was going for.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the performances that play in the Donner Cut. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would watch that double feature for sure.
Yeah.
Mine is going to be a little bit more on the repetitive side and maybe not nearly as fun, but for me who does editing for a living, I would just get a kick out of it. So this will be boring for a lot of people, but I would have both cuts of Superman 2. This is going to be a little bit of a cheat. The lesser cut and the Donner Cut. And I would present this to the person watching it that both are good. Watch them from that point of view, that there's neither one's better than the other. They're different. And it would be very interesting to see how what they felt in each one.
Yeah. Because there are definitely lots and lots of people out there who strongly prefer one or the other. And I think that's fine. I just
yeah.
I'm not here for that argument of which one wins. It's just like, no, they're both good. I'm just really happy I finally got to watch this one again.
Yeah. And what's kind of the main reason too is like that Paris sequence is exciting.
Yeah.
In the lesser cut. That's an exciting sequence, and it's such an exciting way to really build tension to bring Superman into play, and then have that bomb be what looses the three Kryptonians. And that's a very exciting way to get this thing kicked off and going.
Yeah.
And just the anticipation of Superman going to show up and the shit that Lois gets into on the Eiffel Tower. Like, holy balls, that's intense.
Yeah.
But then, then there's trade-offs. And I would love to just have people experience the trade-offs in a very compressed amount of time.
Yeah.
And just appreciate that.
Because even the flip of in the Donner Cut, Superman frees Zod. Like, it's his fuck-up. Because he just thought chucking a missile into space would be fine. Like, I love that sort of stuff. Like, they both work, just different.
Yeah. And it's a very fascinating way to approach it, and might give people more of a sense of just, how these things can go. And how maybe a person's cut is a lot more specific to them than we might realize or give credit for.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. We've done it, right?
We did it.
Oh my God. So next week, I mentioned way earlier, will be Lethal Weapon 2. And we're hoping to have Matt Dykes on for that one, depending on scheduling. I know he's already watched it, I think, twice and already taken notes, so he really wants to be on. But it will obviously have to be scheduling permitting. And then after that, I still haven't decided what the last movie, the one after that will be, and then we still have one more after that, which will be Timeline. But in between Timeline and... I just blanked on Lethal Weapon 2. Jesus Christ. On Lethal Weapon 2, there will be another one. I just haven't fully decided on what that will be yet. It might be Goonies. It might not be Goonies. We'll figure it out. But be sure to tune in for at least Lethal Weapon 2 and probably Timeline, because, Timeline's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, just go with us on that one. We want Paul Walker back in our experience, and just to wrap it, bring it to a close with him. I
bet we'll still find things we enjoy about that movie. I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
And then for this show, every other show on the ATH network, be sure to check out athpod.com. And Binge Buddies, we're just about done with season 1 of What We Do in the Shadows. And then we're going to take a little bit of time off before season 2. Not too much time, just a little bit. And then we have Damage Boost. We got lots of really fun stuff going on Damage Boost. John, have you recorded your episode with him yet on the Punk of Cybers?
Yes, and it turned out to be a lot more kind of just about that sort of situation in general. It got very big picture and a bit headier than I was expecting it to, and less nitpicky on the problems, but just pointing out, like, I think at one point I told, as a little bit of a teaser, I mentioned that I could sell him and unsell him on the game continually. I could spend an hour doing it. I could give him one way that, hey, this is awesome, and then turn around and immediately unsell him on it. And I did that a couple times, but just to give you kind of a sense of where we kind of went around the merry-go-round a bit with that one, and I'm excited to hear it.
I'm excited to hear it too. And then what's going on with Demon Days?
Got another episode coming out. We're getting to some exciting fights coming up. Got to start editing the next one, which by the time you hear this, it will have been done. So, yeah, can't wait for you guys to check it out.
Very exciting stuff. And then Chewy, what about... Oh, yeah, you're not here. So, I think that does it. Should we say goodbye?
Indeed.
Goodbye? Goodbye?
Bye.
Bye? Bye? Bye?